All right, I am beginning this Housing Task Force meeting of September 9th. Can I have a roll call? We will start over here.
Eileen Murphy?
Judith Spang.
Michael Barron, Town Planner, Michael Mulhern and Michael Saputo cannot make it.
And Heather Grant can't make it. She's
Right.
She's out of state. Sally Tobias.
Al Howland.
Paul Rasmussen.
We have a quorum. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah.
So we are good. Yay. Okay. All right, so we did a roll call. Can I have somebody approve the agenda? Any changes to the agenda?
So moved.
So moved. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay.
Aye.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great. Do we have any public comments? There's only invisible people here today. Anybody on DCAT?
You want me to, I'm going to.
No,
Yeah.
but you might want to close the door.
I'm going to shut
Oh,
the
yeah.
door.
Does anyone need an agenda? Jude, can you one?
I just do it until.
You just do. As long as you agree with it, that's good.
It's a presentation to the police.
No, it's to the Agricultural Commission. We haven't done agriculture yet. We've done conservation and agriculture. It should be interesting.
So they sent comments without your having to.
Yeah, they sent comments on.
Well, on the ordinance.
On the ordinance.
So we're talking about the,
Well, let me finish.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have minutes. Do we have minutes? I didn't see any minutes.
oh no, well, Eileen finished them, but not in time for me to get them to you. So
Okay, so
we'll do
you
them.
The
do
ones from July, though, were not approved because you didn't have quorum last meeting. I think
Oh,
I
yeah.
have had
There
time
you
to
go.
look
Good
at
catch.
July.
We can,
Were those my minutes or yours from July?
I think mine.
Oh, okay.
I didn't have any issues with July. Do we want to approve July?
I'll make a motion to approve the July
Okay.
minutes.
Second?
All right, then motion to approve July.
Aye.
Any abstentions?
I'll abstain.
You were gone.
Excuse me, Sally?
Yeah?
Could you move your microphone?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just noticed it. Thank you. All right, do we have any reports from committee members? I know planning board probably does, but we're going to be discussing the workforce. Oh, and Taylor Cray is just entering the room. She is the advisor for the Workforce Housing Coalition. I knew there was somebody missing. We don't have any outreach, any reports. Oh, you got some.
I'll just do one because I ran the Parks and Rec meeting, the August Parks and Rec meeting. And so there was some feedback about, because the Housing Task Force is going to do the presentation, I believe, September
Yes.
24th or whatever. So the two pieces of feedback that came, and it's actually worth watching them. The entire meeting was only 50 minutes, and a big chunk of the meeting actually was about housing. There were two things that they really requested in terms of what they wanted to see. And I think a lot of it came from seeing what the Agricultural Commission, because they came and made recommendations. I think the Parks and Rec Department, they're in the midst of a needs assessment for their department that they're using UNH to work on, so it's kind of timely. And the two things they were really looking at, and I started to look for it, they're looking at how recreation is built into large developments. And I looked at, like, for example, UNH's new EDGE project. There's a drawing of it. How does it fit in? Is there public space, meeting space that could be used by Parks and Rec? Are there walking trails? Is it bikeable? That's what they're really looking at. Right now, even though we haven't finished our needs assessment, it's really becoming more and more challenging for Parks and Rec because they don't have a lot of their own space. They really depend on the school district for a lot of space, and it's becoming more challenging to use it. And so if we are adding new facilities, it's important for us to see, like, is there ways that we could harness these new developments, provide us with more usable space. And so again, I just off the top of my head, I pulled up that west edge because it's a nice picture of a development that's going to occur here. And then also I pulled up Kittery because there's a proposal for a big development there. How would that fit in with us? So I think that would be really important. And then that's what that's what they really want to hear about. And then the second one was another interesting question, which I think is in the RKG report. They were asking, like, who are we trying to have move into Durham? What are we missing? And like demographically, and what is this housing really for? Is it for seniors? Is it for, I mean, who is missing, and what are we trying to build for? And so I think those are the two real questions that they were looking to have answered.
Okay. Well, I know you had sent me an email and asked about, how we could change the presentation. I think it's best just to do the presentation and to let them know that every time you interrupt me, it's going to take time. Because I think we get help. I know there was somebody at Conservation Commission who said they didn't have enough time. It's because there was a lot of interruptions during that. And if board members ask a lot of questions going forth, they're taking away the time they've already allotted to me. So if they don't have time, they have to wait to the end and don't argue the data. We had somebody there that was arguing the data. Okay, so I'm going to make that clear to people. But those are good things to ask. That's exactly the kind of stuff we want, the kind of feedback we'd want from the committees. It's like, this is what we would see. So when you're looking at writing overlays that, we could look at what we can do. I mean, we can't guarantee we're going to have that stuff.
No, I mean, I think I tried to so I asked everybody on the committee to read the executive summary of the RKG report before, and then we had discussion. So we did kind of a pre-discussion before you guys even came to kind of prime the committee for it. So it wasn't just like a blank slate. So I think, there was a really good discussion on the Parks and Rec last meeting that you can watch, and it really it's really informative, and I think it'll help to make it hopefully a good discussion going forward.
Yeah, I mean, if there are certain things they want in developments, they're going to have to get more proactive in going to the planning board and going to the council to support such things, but there may be some tit for tat.
They are actually tonight. They're going. I believe for tonight's agenda, Parks and Rec. Kathy Leach, who's our chair, is giving a presentation on Parks and Rec programming.
It's her Parks and Rec thing.
Well, Al, the last communication that Sally and I had with Kathy, and I don't know if you've had any since, was Kathy seemed inclined to keep it very, constrained, 15 minutes, and only to talk about housing as it relates to recreation. So I haven't heard anything more. I don't know if she's open to more time or broader topic.
I guess it just keep the conversation focused is my only thing I would say. I mean, I've tried to do everything I can to pre-prime the committee for this, and I've given, not only have I had a discussion with the committee, I've come back and given what the committee wants to see, and I think that's about all I can do. So it's like, we'll see how it goes.
I mean, if they're only going to give us 15 minutes, and it was hard getting that 15 minutes, by the way. No offense to anybody, but it was difficult to get it. For whatever reason, of lack of understanding or what. But if they're truly only going to stick to that, and maybe we could reach out to Kathy to see if we could get a little more time. Maybe if we sent them the presentation and the members could look at the presentation beforehand, and then we could just ask them, what their feedback.
Great idea.
Because we can't necessarily even show them, and then, because the thing is, the chair is giving us 15 minutes, but the reality is when we start doing these presentations, board members have a completely different objective and thought process during that than the chair. They see something and they have a question or they want to talk about something. So it's hard to stay in the time frames the chairs are giving us because they themselves extend the period of time we're there.
I mean, I think it's just give them the presentation in advance is always a good
Yeah.
idea. I mean, the more information, the more homework people do before they come into something, generally the better the outcome is, I tend to find. And so I think by, everything that can possibly be done before this
Yeah.
has been done, so.
So we'll send it in beforehand. We could just send in the PowerPoint.
Al, are you on the
presentation.
Parks and Rec Committee?
I'm the vice chair of the Parks
okay.
and Rec Committee, so I'm in this strange middle area trying to negotiate with the committee and with this committee, and I've tried to facilitate as much pre-information. You know, I like focused conversations, so I've been trying to give them as much as possible before they walk in.
I think we can probably focus in as much as we can. It'll be a little bit different, but anyways. Okay, well, thanks on that. Figure it out. Any other presentation, anything new in housing?
Nothing.
Oh, how much of stuff going on? Or you
I mean, there's a lot of stuff going
You
on.
need to get closer to
Yeah,
the
if you don't, I mean,
mic.
if you don't mind telling us and
Yeah, I guess
about the
it, I
tour
guess
we
it
did recently.
depends really. Yeah, so we did a tour in Dover on the 27th of August, which was a Tuesday. And that was a tour of some infill gentle density development at Sophie and Banner Drive. And what was done with this parcel of land, so it's about a little over 7.5 acres of land. And under the traditional zoning in that area, there could have been, I think, 9 single-family homes. And what came out of it is 31 units. It's a mix of single-family homes for sale, townhouses for rent, and some of those townhouses and apartments are permanently deed restricted at HUD Fair Market because the developer used Dover's transfer of development rights to build with that level of density. And so instead of having 9 single-family homes, you now have 31 units, some of which are, I think, 8 or so are permanently affordable. So that's really, not all 8 are deed restricted, permanently affordable. I think it's more like 5 of them are actually deed restricted,
Yeah.
and the rest of them, the developer, Rob, was just able to do that because of the cost benefit that came out of the density that he was able to create there. So that was really, I felt like that was a great walkthrough. I mean, he is
Yeah.
a wealth of knowledge, and I was really grateful to get people there to walk around.
It was really, it's amazing how the neighborhood felt to me very comfortable to be in. Of course, I've lived in California, and that's often how the neighborhoods are.
Yeah.
But with that, some people might think, oh, it's congested, but the reality, those kind of neighborhoods create such a sense of neighborhood and community and friends, and the kids all play, and the parents sit out there and, you know, have a cocktail at the end, watch the kids, you know, playing, and there's Halloween parties and Christmas parties and birthday parties. And so it really does create a neighborhood feel that's really safe and protected because you're not having cars going by.
Yeah,
And yeah, because
Sorry.
they're inside. So,
I feel like a benefit of that neighborhood as well is like the way it's designed. You
Yeah.
can't have cars going fast through there.
No.
So we saw even while we
Yeah.
were on this tour of family walking around and kids playing, and so I really think that's the kind of thing where it's fairly specific to the fact that the developer could use TDR to do this project.
Yeah.
But he's really, I mean, he's doing other projects in Dover. He's doing a project in Rochester, and he's just someone who has, I think, been really inspired by the ability to use density as a tool to create more affordable housing.
Yeah.
And so he's done some projects that are smaller footprint, not necessarily super affordable, but more affordable than they would be
well,
otherwise.
I think it's
And he-
important to keep affordable in context.
Yeah.
And because that was a mix of for purchase
Mm-hmm.
and rent. And the for purchase homes were a smaller footprint, but
Mm-hmm.
really not at all cramped. They were very spacious. They were very well done.
Yeah.
And the reality is that the price point that they were selling them at was over median, but not that far over median.
Right.
And when the median price in New Hampshire is $530,000, you're not going to get much lower than that for even an affordable unit.
Yeah.
And so people need to realize no one's going to be building houses for $350,000. It's highly unlikely.
And I think it's also like the way we define affordable is important. There's so
Yeah.
many different ways to define
Yeah.
affordable housing, and if you're looking at affordable housing as like that 30% of like rental,
Yeah.
30% of someone's income, that's tough to come by. And I think that's why Rob used the term attainable so frequently.
Yeah.
He has said himself, he's like, I don't know what all these different workforce, affordable, attainable. And so he says, he's like, I build housing that is attainable, hopefully to people who want to live in this area. And I mean, I think it's a great start. And the more projects like that get built, the more there is actually,
The cost actually.
yeah. And I mean, even those townhouses, like the rent on some of those is more affordable than in some other apartments you could find in the area. And so I think, I think that was great. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah.
I mean, the only thing I'll add to that is, especially because for us in Durham, we talk all the time about conservation land, all
Yeah.
the time. And the use of TDR put $2 million in their conservation to be used to work on your conservation land. And I think that's something we found. It's one thing to conserve land, it's another thing to maintain it. And it's like,
Well, that's-
you can either do it out of the general fund, which it comes out of the taxpayer's pocket, or you can be creative and do something like TDR, which I think Dover has done. And I think that's clearly something we should look at.
Well, that's one thing about conservation land. And do you have any idea, what is the percentage of conservation land we have in Durham?
Oh, it depends what you count, but I would like to get some figures on that, because
I think we need those
Durham
figures.
has,
A lot.
we are not counting communities that are part of like the White Mountain National Forest. Durham is way up there in the percentage of land per capita, because the town has half a dozen wonderful preserved spaces. UNH has a handful of them. There's the Audubon Society, Nature Conservancy, Southeast Land Trust, they've all been very active in
Got a
Durham.
lot.
We have a lot, plus we have a handful that were preserved with conservation subdivisions. Not all of it is permanently preserved, like College Woods, there's no easement, but, I can't imagine UNH
Well,
making
yeah.
serious incursion there.
How much have we set aside in money for that?
We
I'll play the devil's advocate. So we have a high percentage of conservation land. How much have we budgeted in our town budget to maintain those properties?
well,
A lot of it's from the conservation fund.
So,
you know,
in other words,
100%.
and I'm talking us out
the
of
general
pocket,
fund.
general fund. That would be a good thing to
Good
know.
question, yeah. Obviously, part of it is to cover the
Land stewardship.
salary of our contract land stewardship person, which is like third time, I think. That's her time. I don't know, I'll see if I can find that out.
Yeah, and it's not, it's a lot, but I don't know what she makes now. I think it was 30 grand, or something like that, maybe more than that. But it is interesting to take that. That has actually been a question that has come up in this, is like, what are the implications tax-wise? And the reality is that undeveloped land is very low tax assessment versus developed land could be, a $50 million tax assessment, like the cottages up at the end of town. That's a significant tax on that's just one property.
But I meant it like this also. You can't conserve land and just neglect it.
Well, that's one.
So
yeah.
there is and that's why a lot of communities don't want to accept that property or roads or anything else, because there's a fee that comes along with that. So if we're going to have it's not good enough just to say we got a grant to get a piece of property. How are we maintaining that
Well,
property?
that-
And I think that there's a cost to our general fund to do that. Is TDR a good way to come up with funding to allow us not to have to tax property owners?
It's a thought looking at that, because we don't need any more land to conserve, really. I mean, some would argue with that, but, that would be up to the property owners to decide if that was what they were going to do. But taking care of that land does come with a cost, and that's one of the reasons why the Land Stewardship Subcommittee was created, because there were some messes out there that needed to be dealt with at great cost. And we have a lot of volunteer time, but there is still cost involved in taking some of this stuff down.
The cost of conservation land also depends on what the purpose of that particular land
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
from a conservation viewpoint. If it's being used for recreation, then
as far as, you know, to look at it.
Well, I don't
But-
mean to put a kibosh on it, and it doesn't really make much of a difference, but, you know, I don't want something out there that's just not good, with all due respect, Al. I promise you Durham will never have TDR. It's for a couple reasons.
Well,
It's extremely complicated, and it can only, I think Dover's the only place that has it in New Hampshire. And it can only work if you have lots of land being developed in high numbers. Like if we had 20 lot subdivisions being developed left and right, and we had a lot of land in the downtown that we could transfer that to, maybe. But our subdivisions are 2 or 3 lots. So it's, again, I don't want to be, put a kibosh on it. But I just don't like, I just want people to know it's an idea. I've had a lot of experience with
It's a
this.
tool.
It's not going to happen in Durham.
in the right situation, I could see the town in 5 to 10 years developing a TDR project with the intent of expanding the downtown. You know, you know, because that is one of the things the planning board, some of the planning board members have mentioned in passing, is we need to look at how to expand the downtown into a neighboring zone. And part of that, one of the potential tools to do that could be a TDR, right? We could get transfer rights from our rural zones,
Yeah.
protect those rural zones more to allow greater density to grow into one of the neighboring downtown zones.
Deal with.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not needing to belabor the point. I'm just saying that communities that are really successful have a lot of tools in their toolkit.
You have to think out of the
Communities that aren't don't have many tools in their toolkits. So to start off by saying this will never work in Durham,
I just want to be
keep
honest.
keep
you know,
as many
Well,
tools.
I don't want
available.
people to be thinking, oh, let's explore that. You know, there's lots of things. Durham's, anyway, I've said my part.
Well, we can, that would be open for debate, and that's what it would be. But you do have to start thinking out of the box, and especially when you're looking at developing downtown, there's a lot of infrastructure challenges, but anyways. And it showed a good combination of for sale and for rent mix in a very small area that really created a nice thing.
Yeah, we have a couple other events coming up that will explore other things as well. We're doing a walking tour in Newmarket about their use of 79E.
Yeah,
So
and
that could be another interesting potential.
that'll be one we're going to talk about later when we get into proposals for the downtown, work
Yeah.
on downtown, because I think
Yeah.
79E is going to have to be reconsidered on the town level. All right, anyways, so let's move on to the outreach. I just put together a PowerPoint. This really isn't for a lot of discussion, but I think it's just to kind of show the kind of feedback that we're getting from the committees, and I think so far it's been very successful. It depends, of course, on the committee. Some are a little bit more, energetic about their own causes, but I think it really has given a lot of people an opportunity to speak from what they are interested in, which is that committee they're sitting on, and then also some of their own personal thoughts. So it's actually been, as I was discussing before, we go in there and we're given so much time, but everybody wants to say more and more and more, and we're learning a lot. So anyways, I'm just going to run through this. One of the things we're showing them is like different options for zoning, and these are just some of the thoughts on zoning that have come down that people are fine with, that are like, yeah, we could see that, but of course, what and where? You know, cottage clusters, we've had some good response on that. Pocket developments, smaller little compact development on a larger piece of land. Duplexes, I think that people see they're reasonable now. I think that the fear of duplexes is waning. Townhomes and row houses are something that seems popular to people. And of course, multifamily. What it looked like, of course, would matter. We talked about accessory dwelling units. We did have one, I didn't put it in there, but one conversation about the need for the door. The need for the weird little locked door seems to be odd and completely goes against fire code, so I don't know why we have to do that. But Detached, a lot of people are seeing that detached by right should be considered. Of course, the lot size and the dimensions of the lot would have something to do with that. A second one being allowed by special exception or by, of course, the size of the lot. Special exception would be a variance that would have to go through. So I don't know if that would be something we would really do or not, but that was brought up. And someone suggested that the second ADU have a smaller footprint than the first ADU that's attached, because that would be an attached and a detached. We talk about increasing density. They are encouraging infill development, which is something similar to the Sophie Banner development we saw the other day. You can get a lot in a small piece of land. They create smaller lot sizes in residential districts. They see no problem with that. Repurposing of his existing homes seems to be, a thought, and you can turn a single-family home into, if we make it more possible, turn a single-family home into, say, 2 homes or duplexes or even 3, depending upon the size of it. The encouragement of smaller built homes, smaller footprints, more energy efficient. Denser neighborhoods, they see no problem with that. Many of them live in very dense neighborhoods. And then the rural and the RC was pointed out that the rural zone and the RC zone already have smaller lots than they're zoned for right now. So they see, why shouldn't they be smaller lots? We have a 3.5 requirement now for a single family home. There are already smaller lots than that, so why not go smaller? Which is something to look at. Here's some other ideas they thought on what we could come up with. Create pocket developments on large tracts of land. So if you have a large piece of land, if we were able to create little areas of housing and keep the rest of the land open, which is similar to our conservation subdivision, but perhaps instead of the entire zoning, instead of changing all the zoning, you could just create overlays, and that would kind of create that pocket development. Create a village centers to lessen sprawl impact. So if you're out further and we have a development out further from the town center, there could be some kind of commercial aspect to it that people wouldn't have to go rushing into the town. They could, how that would work. Allow housing in the commercial zones, which we've talked about. And that seems to be something people are thinking of. And of course, this has come up a few times, address the housing options downtown. Right now, we just have students really living downtown. And so that's a whole other thing, a completely different story. So we'd have to look at that. Infrastructure. They think, most people think that we should build where the existing infrastructure is. This next one is in yellow. It's not the greatest color. Sorry about that. Investigate innovation where infrastructure isn't there. So the concerns out in the rural area is the lack of infrastructure and bringing in housing developments with septic and sewer and all that stuff. But there are some innovations, and they would encourage that those innovations be looked at to create septic, which is possible. Group septic is possible. Group water that works. Denser developments, this was a comment somebody's made. Denser developments bring in people to pay for the infrastructure. So if infrastructure's got to be put in, the denser the development creates more people buying that pays for it. And the downtown infrastructure challenges need to be addressed. That was something that's come up too from people. The reality that many people said downtown needs housing. I think the reality of downtown housing brings a whole different challenge. These are some of the thoughts that people have been sharing, that Durham needs missing middle options. Durham needs economic diversity, we say we're a diverse town, but I think some people are seeing that it's getting harder for just middle-class people to live here. That the present situation is not sustainable. That was an interesting one. And I think that I could, I agree with that, because if we keep going at the rate we're going, it's just going to be a very exclusive, wealthy neighborhood.
I'm interested in who made that statement and what they actually meant by sustainable, because I can read that one like a half a dozen different ways.
It was actually made at the IMAC,
Okay.
and she was talking about the way
Because I
that
haven't
what we
been on
have now
multiple
as far as
committees.
people.
IMAC's interpretation of sustainable is very different from the Ag Commission's interpretation of sustainable, which is,
Yeah, yeah.
so,
Well, from what I took it is that she meant that it was,
versus somebody who might simply be talking from an economic viewpoint.
yeah, I think it was more like from an economic viewpoint, this view. And because it was like what we have now is limited. We had creating housing is a moral imperative. We had a couple of people actually say that. Of course, how do we balance housing with conservation? And of course, how will schools be impacted? That's a big one, and one many people are still concerned with. We also had, we want to see housing that is reducing our carbon footprint. If we're bringing more people in, we want to take advantage of higher energy and denser homes. There was the conversation, somebody mentioned something about shared, in multi-unit, like shared, we'd have to kind of look at what that means. I think we do have that covered. And what do we build and where do we put it was a question people had. And how is affordability achieved? There were a couple of people that really felt it was impossible to create affordable housing. Maintaining our quality of life, keeping our rural feel and our pastoral views are important to people. There was one there was a concern. This person was concerned about aesthetics over conservation in our present zoning. This person felt that in our conservation subdivision that we're more concerned about what something looks like rather than what we're actually conserving or protecting. And how are our taxes affected? That comes up. And then what about? And then people ask, well, what about climate change? What about the infrastructure? What about conservation? Wildlife corridors, natural resources, what about the UNH and what about our aging population? These are all questions that people have come up. So that's kind of the comments that are popping up so far. There seems to be an overlap as we go from from committee to committee. There's a lot of the same things, but depends on who we're talking to.
Is this, should we put this on our website or ask Todd to put it on
I
Friday
think what we'll
updates?
do is, we still have a couple more. I want to make sure, I'm just going to leave that here. I want to make sure I get everybody else's in first, because we're going to do the ag committee, and so once we get everybody else's in, we'll kind of, I might even put it in a different kind of, but yeah, because I think we're going to get the same kind of stuff from Agricultural Commission and from Parks and Rec, but there's already some things about the Parks and Rec that they are, like recreation space and connectivity and things like that. Now,
You have enrollment spelled out.
oh, I have, and yeah, I do. Well, I'll have to look at that and fix it.
Nobody's-
College grads.
I think, is aging spelled correctly? I'm looking.
Oh, aging
No.
too.
That's
yeah.
wrong too, yeah.
Mr. E.
Well, it was a Sunday afternoon, and I'm just sitting there with my dog typing this out, so.
Oh, the
Anyways.
dog did the typing?
No, Hermione doesn't type well.
Yeah.
She likes to use the microphone to speak all her terms. Anyways, I do have I probably should have passed these out, but I can pass out so you each have your own copy of what we've got so far. Pass those out there.
Sally, I think I mentioned to the gentleman who was here speaking last time about school enrollment that New Hampshire Housing is about to put out a really in-depth research report about the impact of new housing on school enrollment, like statewide and countywide. I'm not really sure how they've broken up their data, but I think it's going to be really helpful for a lot of these conversations. And Sarah Reitzman, who is with New Hampshire Housing, was just saying the other day that they think it will be out in the next couple of weeks.
Oh,
So
great.
that, I think, will be a really helpful tool for these conversations.
We can hope, but the knee-jerk reaction around here is anything that we didn't do ourselves doesn't pertain to us.
Doesn't work.
Yeah, I know, but that is true. And, but there is a point where, you know, you have to simply say, well, these are the facts that
Well,
got.
with that, I'll also bring it, because I did a presentation, or as part of a presentation on impact on schools. And it's kind of interesting because something really did come up. When we did that, I said the one area of concern that I had was the elementary schools, because that's where you had the least amount of flexibility. Having two schools that are K through 4 that you're busing kids to with a pretty tight maximum, it is tricky. And I said that's the area of my greatest concern. And lo and behold, it came to fruition this time. So they had a large group of kindergartners suddenly showed up, and they were trying to figure out, how do we make this work? And that's been a significant discussion at the school board level right now already. So I think, you know, just keep that in mind. The middle school and the high school were easy. The elementary school is not so easy.
But they figured it out.
They figured it out,
They
but
figured it out, the parents didn't like it, so they went back to the bad solution.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and
And
that's
which
the
is
reality.
disappointing, because what you end up having now is if I had parents in that grade, I'd be annoyed that those dozen or so families are causing my kid to be in an overcrowded situation when it wouldn't have had to be.
Yeah.
You know,
Well-
and it's not the first time that I've been here. It's always the elementary schools that have a problem. It comes back every 5-6 years.
And
It's super awesome when you do
And-
it, by the way, because you get like a lot of people to come out. If you really want to know what a really tremendously difficult discussion is, I know you guys in the planning board are used to it, but that's one of them. And it will, and as Paul pointed out, it has come up repeatedly over the last decade or so, and it really, you know, it will be a challenge.
I heard one of the proposals, not one that was selected because they felt it would have a hard time flying, but it's probably one that should be talked about more and more, is the idea of making one of the schools K through 2 and the other one 3 and 4
Yeah.
type deal. And that way, everybody goes to every school at some point.
Yeah, that was a decade ago. We brought that up.
And the fifth graders go to middle school? Is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
and they all
Without
go-
knowing the whole story, did the issue that arose, did that reflect that
Moheramit's overcrowded.
Moheramit's overcrowded? Does that reflect an influx of people in a
Yeah.
certain town?
It's weird because you, especially with kindergartners, it's this mystery that just shows up when you do enrollment.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily an influx of people, but it's an influx of like babies.
5-year-olds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the thing is, there is a COVID bump happening.
Well, but I mean, they wouldn't hit kindergarten yet. So it's the thing, it's just really, really, really hard with kindergarten to plan. And you have to keep in mind, and just a reminder that Moheramet, at one point, Moheramet had over 400 kids in it. It's down to, its ideal size is, I believe, slightly under 300 now. We took away 2 modulars, so we actually reduced the space. So there just isn't a lot of wiggle room for the flexibility that shows up, and it doesn't take a lot of kids to kind of tip things out of balance.
And that can happen even without you.
So just the fact that it happened at Moheramet, does that mean, I don't know what the breakdown is from where those kids are coming from? Does that mean there are a lot of 5-year-olds in Durham that weren't here last year?
So we broke down, over a decade ago, we broke down, the way we solved it was like changing the bus routes and shifting more kids to Mast Way. So I don't know, so it must be that the people in the current bus route configuration, more people moved into the one that's being diverted to Moheramet.
So this is student housing result. is what it is. Because a lot of the zones that feed Mohammed were ones that had a lot of students in the neighborhoods, like up near where Sally and I
Yeah.
are, and they all converted to families with little, with little kids that moved into town, into the existing single-family houses, neighborhoods that we sucked the students out of and brought downtown.
Which was part of what they wanted to get out of the student housing, was to bring the neighborhoods, clear the neighborhoods of the students living there.
On another tack, you've talked a lot about all of the different types of housing options that we have. Have you heard any feedback that was really negative about any particular type of housing or location?
I think the most negative feedback we've gotten was from a couple of people that just feel that we shouldn't be, well, I think actually it's one person so far, that we should only be looking at downtown. We shouldn't be looking anywhere but downtown. That's all they said was it only should be downtown. And they're more conservation minded, and I get that, you know. But I think some people need to be reminded that what we already have allows people to build on land already. They just said, if you can build with our conservation subdivision, if you have, 15 acres of property, you can still build, how many single-family homes, or you can build, a conservation subdivision already. So why not just increase the density and allow for some other types of housing there? I think that people think, no, it should only be downtown, should only be downtown.
I think in the various places like the Durham town events, I've heard people speaking negatively about multifamily. And I'm not, we've just begun to talk about downtown, but I think people are imagining a big block of apartment type things.
Yeah.
So multifamily, are we beginning to get through to them that there are ways to do multifamily that are very amenable to a more rural area?
The question that well, it depends on where the multifamily is. One of the questions that people are having, and they're concerned about multifamily, and why we basically have a moratorium on multifamily in the town of Durham, has come out of the large student developments. That they're like, well, how do you keep them from not becoming student developments? And so there is a certain amount of education, but we try to keep telling people that these student developments were purpose-built for students. That things on the ground are different than they were 30, 40 years ago, because now that we have these, they're not just taking up, over duplexes and things like that. But I think it is, they're concerned that they'll be overrun with students. And we've explained that there are some tools that we can have that are part of what we've actually put in the new overlay district amendment on the planning board, that about instructions about leases and how the lease is written, guarantors, non-guarantors and things like that. There is some control. And then there's also the reality that if it's not built just for students, there's going to be other people in there, and they tend to police themselves really well. When you've got a loud, obnoxious neighbor, it usually disappears pretty quickly because they get in trouble, because those are against the rules on the property. But I think people have a fear of it becoming student property.
There's been a little talk about the building heights. I think the ordinance, is three stories, are we? Or am I confusing?
Downtown.
Downtown?
Yeah.
For the overlay.
Yeah,
How
mix
about-
of 3 and
I would
4.
think that out of town, it might also become something people, they don't want to see another Riverwoods. And I'm just wondering about if that is the key, is the number of stories that are in these.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, and the thing is, some of our multi-housing might be, fourplexes and townhouses, or they may be the garden style with 8 units in it, just 2 stories. That's what you really, when you're getting up to when you're getting into 4 stories, you're putting in elevators, and that's a cost, and it just brings the cost up. So if you can keep it at just 2 stories to going up and down, so, yeah, I think that building height is, what is the building height in the overlay?
3.
3 stories, yeah. It's certainly something that's going to come up for the downtown, because there's not enough density downtown to build anything affordable, close to affordable. Right now.
So it sounds like the most specific thing that we have heard in the public hearing was the 200. You can get a conditional use permit for over 200 units.
Oh, well, that's in the ordinance. Right now, the ordinance allows for 200 units. But of course, that's going to depend on the size of the property.
Well, that's
because
maximum on a
that's
very large
max.
parcel.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it would be much less depending upon the piece of property.
Yeah, there's only one, I mean, as a practical matter, probably one parcel, I don't know, maybe there's a second one, that could theoretically take that up to that many, so it's, but yeah, the discussions were mostly about housing in general, but there were also discussions about the draft ordinance.
Yeah, there were some questions about that. But I think we're kind of trying to get an idea of what people would accept and what they like. And I think that from that we can, as we go through this, the whole purpose was to create suggestions for zonings, like to make duplexes allowed, to maybe have that second, or to create the detached ADU, since the state, hasn't done it yet.
It's to that.
I think it's coming though.
It's coming. Ellen Reed, who filed an ADU bill the last 2 terms, is filing hers again. And then I'm working with a Republican. We're filing an ADU bill as well. So there is definitely going to be legislation on ADUs coming.
Yeah.
What do you think would be in it?
In which one?
I mean, in any of the ADUs that might get through, second ADU?
The Ellen Reed's ADU bill allowed attached and detached by right, and it would allow a second ADU, particularly if it was workforce housing. The one I'm working on would be either an attached or detached by right anywhere in any residential zone that you allow single family.
Wasn't the biggest stumbling block the Senate, though?
The biggest stumbling block was the Senate, but there was pushback about the second ADU from the House. Even though it did pass, there was some resistance to it. And so there was kind of a call to make it a simpler bill. And the idea, really, the one we're working on, is that municipalities still, the attached are allowed by either conditional, you can allow them by right, but they have to be allowed at least by conditional use or special exception. And the thing is that's the town already, or the municipality already controls the site plan regulations. And so it muddies the water. You want clarity, not a muddy water. And so therefore, since the town already controls the site plan regulations, clear site plan regulations that let the homeowner know exactly what they can do should be the goal. And then the second with the detached is that when you look at elderly and disabled people, a detached ADU allows a lot more flexibility in terms of design to meet that. And so again, if the municipality controls the site plan regulations, and if it meets setbacks, heights, and everything else, saying no to it doesn't make a lot of sense. And so that's what's coming through.
Yeah.
With the outreach, so if I think it's actually been very successful, I'm pleased to observe. Sally has done, I think, about a half a dozen, and some people on the committee, have joined her, Heather and Paul and some others. And I think there's only a few left. Agriculture Commission tonight, the Human Rights Commission, which I think they had to push back because of a busy schedule.
And
Parks and Recreation. And I want to do with a technical review group, but I want to have it when they're meeting anyway, because if we just have this, then they probably won't show up.
They won't show up.
They won't show up. But then our original plan was to reach out to the broader Durham community.
Yeah.
And it'd be great if we could, not today, but in the next month or so, identify other groups in town, Durham Business Association, Rotary, neighborhood associations, teachers groups, play groups that, we could take our show on the road to a little bit.
Yeah.
Another half a dozen at least.
That would be good.
I can think of one off the top of my head is ORPP.
Oyster River Preschool, I was just thinking of.
Yeah, that's a group of young families that are coming in, so it would give you a different demographic.
Oh, what does that stand for?
Oyster River
Parents and
preschool
preschoolers.
Parents, is that
Parents
what it is?
and
Yeah.
preschoolers.
Parents and
Preschoolers
preschoolers.
Parents and
whatever.
preschoolers, yeah. Oyster
Oh.
River Preschoolers, ORPP.
We probably should start, if we have ideas, we probably should start reaching out on some of these other
Yeah,
groups.
yeah. I mean, and
If anyone has any ideas, please just send Sally or me an email.
yeah.
Sally, when are we going to reach the limit of your stamina?
I've got a lot.
She's indefatigable.
That's very lucky for us.
We can go and I'll just drag more people in.
I think it's been really good, I gotta be honest.
I think it's,
I mean, when I watched what the other communities have done with the Invest New Hampshire money, I think we've done a pretty good job of emulating it, reaching out. I mean, it's been a pretty broad outreach that we've done. And I think this is really helpful, coming up with some of the ideas, what people want to see or are concerned about. So I think it's good.
yeah, I think what we're getting can create some sensible options that would work in town. We'll have to still get into the zoning map and look at where things would make the most sense, but,
Yeah, that's the
approach.
next big step.
That's the next big step, so. All right, but then, any other questions on this before we move?
So one thing, sort of in response to what folks are telling us, would it be possible to have a presentation to our group from someone who understands land conservation and can tell us, before we propose an overlay for downtown, what are our sensitive areas? You mentioned wildlife corridors.
Oh, yeah, well, downtown is really not going to be affected with conservation. It's a whole different thing, and we're going to I'll get into that in a minute. But for, I think, the concerns about changing zonings in the rural areas or in the RC areas is what's could be of more concern with the conservation-minded, some of the conservation-minded people, and probably will come up in the ag as well.
You'll hear about it tonight for sure.
Yeah, yeah, and so I think that maybe to open up some conversations with maybe Sarah from the Lands Conservation, because she had some thoughts, she has some criticisms about the way we do it now.
I've
the way we
done a lot of
do
work in
the-
this, and I can be of help, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, you have some experience in that. So if we could bring in, looking at, because I think it is looking at maps and maybe looking at what we have and then what we actually can do.
Yeah,
I mean, there's only so
fortunately,
much
that's
we can
probably not
do.
it looks like, this
It could be zoning.
this committee, this task force has done a lot, and I think this overlay district started here, so that is from the task force, and that's a big thing, that's in the works, and I'm feeling quite good about that. That's just myself, I think, anyway. And it sounds like the next project, big thing in zoning, is really focusing on the downtown. So I don't think you'll need to get into
They're not going to like
conservation.
that
land.
tonight.
What?
The conservation group is not going to like that tonight.
Well, but a lot of groups, they seem to be okay with focusing on the core
They
areas.
want to go
Oh, yeah.
downtown.
But
yeah,
maybe,
yeah.
it looks like that's going to be the next thing, and the town administrator asked us to do that. And
Well-
so, however long that takes, I think the task force, you've got the overlay district in the works. I think in the coming months, we're going to have another new ordinance focused on the downtown, and that's also working, planning board's also working on this.
But we'll also have some, like some other suggestions as far as like duplexes and resident, there'll be some different suggestions that we make as well from what we're getting here on just basic zoning. But I think her question is more directed at if we're going to make any suggestions about, probably would be about changing any zoning in the rural district, which is where most of the conservation concerns are coming from, and ag land and conservation land, some of the large tracts. So, I mean,
Yeah.
I
But
think
we're not doing anything with
I
that.
think-
that-
well,
yeah, we'll have to,
I guess like my point was twofold, and it does make sense to consider conservation in the rural areas. We do have waterways downtown. We do have land downtown.
Yeah, there
that
is, yeah.
sensitive, and our zoning code does
And-
not respond very well, other than the coastal zone, which
if we,
kind of responds to the
for down,
context.
for
but
downtown, you mean? Or,
for, like throughout town, does our zoning code change based on, these sensitive corridors, what wildlife is in the area?
when it
It
comes to
sort of
the.
is
the-
more based on where we want density, where we want people to
When
concentrate.
it comes to water, we have shoreline setbacks that are consistent.
Well, I mean,
Right.
College Brook is like, that runs right through downtown.
Yeah.
Came up when we did the dam, remember?
out here,
It comes up with Mill Plaza.
And Mill
Comes up
Plaza.
running along there. That's just-
Stormwater is a big thing when we talk about conserving water resources. Stormwater management is a big, like college,
sure.
and even
Well,
the,
that is definitely
very
gonna come up
developed.
for the downtown.
yeah.
Yeah, that'll definitely come up.
And
for
the
downtown.
setback doesn't always do it. You're
Well,
talking runoff from roofs and parking lots and things like
Why
that.
don't we segue now into the discussions about the downtown?
Or, well, did you want to?
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, let's do the
I have
ordinance first.
a
But
frequently asked
that is gonna come up in the
questions about that.
downtown discussions.
The planning board asked me to do an FAQ on the ordinance, so I put this together.
Okay.
There's a lot here.
You did a great job in when you last mailed out. I would like the format that you used.
Oh, which was that, for the ordinance?
Yeah,
Oh.
we're not talking about
thanks.
the ordinance?
Yeah.
No, this is pre-can we ask?
Yeah, so this is free FAQ.
Well, I didn't want to miss the opportunity to.
This is in support of the ordinance.
Thank you.
This
Thank you.
is in the, yeah, this is into
And this one, we
answering
sent this to the
questions.
planning board,
I
but,
have
okay. But these are, I think, the types of questions that we've heard.
And then you've got some answers in here, right?
Yeah, I've got some answers too.
I
Some
thought-
people, everyone may not agree with, these answers, but best I could do.
Well, the thing is, not everybody agreed that.
So where are you, just as a kind of a backup, where are you guys now? So the
So-
public hearing got closed, right?
We closed the public hearing, and this Wednesday night, the planning board will take up discussion on it for the first time since the closing of the public hearing.
And some of this will come into play.
So we will see where we go from there. There are a couple of board members who'd like to make some significant additions, and there's others who are like, I think it's good, let's go. So we'll see
Yeah.
we're gonna have to see how that balances out.
To be determined.
Yeah.
So, my eye was caught immediately by that concern of Rhubarb about what's affordable, what's workforce, how the terms are switching back and forth. And
Yeah.
Well, affordable housing, I think you did a pretty good job of explaining it.
Yep. I've gotten about halfway through it. I haven't read the whole thing yet.
I think it's important for people also to keep in mind that, especially those who would be, and the reality is that when you look in real estate now and you see a house on the market for $700,000, it's like, oh, wow, that's probably within our budget. So right now, we do not live in an inexpensive area to live in. This is not an inexpensive area to live in.
Michael, do you feel that we have adequately answered the question about rental versus ownership? I felt that there was
I
a
feel
little
we
bit
have.
out.
Some people may
I'm willing to
not get
defend
that,
it.
but
What's that?
I'm willing to defend it. This isn't a one and done thing.
Yeah.
We're going to have
It's going to be more.
2, 3, 4 phases of changes, right? And, one of the, and this first one's focusing on rentals because it's the easy one. And one of the other comments that we've been getting is, we don't want a big change all at once, let's do it slowly. They think this first step is too much, right? So the whole idea of, we're stepping there, we're taking baby steps. This is a baby step. A lot of people don't feel it is, but it's a baby step.
Well, I'm just wondering if we have a large, say we wind up with something over there on Route 4, and we've already said if you're going to develop this large thing, it all has to be rental. If we were going to allow some of it to be rental and homeown, we should let them know right up front.
Well, they can already.
There are complexities when you start mixing rentals and private ownership in the same complex, same development.
Sure.
And especially with regards to, the build out, where this currently, we would have to first allow you to split up the land. Or are you going to do it via townhomes and a condominium association, right? Well, who's allowed in the condominium association? What powers do they have in relation to the people who aren't?
And who's
Okay?
paying for what?
If you have a small condominium association that's being dominated by a large rental manager, those condo owners are never going to get their way. Is that fair? Is that fair for the
That's
town to
pretty-
put in
that's
place?
pretty-
Or the other way around. The condo
Or the other way
owners
around,
may
right.
have all the say, and the renters get none. You know what I mean? So I think it's important to realize that what he says, is not a once and done.
For sure.
This is just one thing. And the reason we went after renting to start is because it is the thing that is the easiest to build, the quickest to build, and gives us the most bang for the buck, and is the most needed in the state. We need rental property, and that it is wonderful that every say, oh, people have to own, that's the gateway to wealth. Well, it is not the choice of a lot of people, and it will never be obtainable for many people. But we still want people to have decent places to live. We have a workforce. You're talking about your retail workers, your not your nurses, but in your medical staff, those people that are in the customer service, those people that are in the janitorial, those people that keep everything running, that make less than $20 an hour, are going to be renting. And without them, we don't get a lot of things. That without those jobs, a lot starts disappearing.
Right.
And so we're not saying we're not going to have it. I think it's important to answer that with, this particular one is focusing on rental, but the next phase will be focusing on something else. So what and then ask them, what kind of to purchase property units would you like to see? How would you like to see that? And the reality is right now, we're not taking away anybody's rights to build for ownership. They can do that right now on that piece of property, and they will still be able to do that on that piece of property. They will just have another option to do something more if they have it,
I think it may have been you, Paul, that said this, is that the gateway to ownership is through rentals. And that's true. So if you don't have the first step in the gateway,
Right.
you can't get to the next
Right,
step.
I
And
was
so
thinking
I think that's where our problem is. And Sally's right. You can build a single family home in Durham right now, pretty much anywhere. The problem is it's going to cost you a really lot of money, and not most people can't do that.
they're going to be very expensive homes, and it's not necessarily solving the problem, but we could do that. And so there's a lot more to think about, I think, when you're looking at to build, especially if we want to build affordable. I don't know how that's going to work. So anything more you want to comment on here? We're going to be looking at this housing ghetto. Did we have questions about the rent averaging? I think
Oh, I didn't even speak to that.
I think
It's
there was only one
too
question. I think
complicated,
one of the council members had a question about it. He didn't quite understand it. There is some information out there to explain what rent averaging is and how it and how the fair market rent can be used to allow people that are on the lower end of the scale to get in, some 30% of fair market versus,
That may be a nice one to find an example of somebody who's used it that. I mean, the one I can think of, I know in that Portsmouth, you know, that development they did from Portsmouth HUD, there was kind of a, you know, this scale
They
they
went up
used.
and
There,
down.
I don't think they had anybody above fair market, but still, it'd be interesting to see a development that used rent averaging.
We're having the same thought, which is that someone at the New Hampshire Housing
Yeah.
Conference was
Yeah,
talking about
was
this
talking
exact
about
thing.
it.
Let me put my brain to figuring
Yeah,
out who that
yeah.
was, because it was either someone,
I-
but it's.
I'm pretty sure I read it
we
somewhere
didn't
else
come up with
first.
it. We,
I've
I
never
brought,
seen
I just
the
was
way it's-
very quick to
It's-
borrow it.
there was a developer there.
Yes.
At the multi-housing conference a few months ago.
Yeah.
There was a developer there, and that's where I heard it
That could
the
be it.
first
it was
time.
But I'll bet it
Fit
wasn't
with
done the
housing,
way
New Hampshire Housing.
Yes,
we
it
came
is.
up with it.
Just to
Michael,
see a
yeah,
concrete
yeah, it was.
example.
Yeah.
Sally and I
I'd
were
like to
both
see
at that
that.
one last
Yes,
spring.
so we
Yeah.
all heard the same.
The same
conversation.
thing.
This
Yeah,
is
yeah.
where this originated.
So some guy was talking about it because he was the developer, and he was looking at how he was able to meet,
Yeah.
because he had some grants, and he needed to stay in a 60% or something like that. And by doing this income averaging, he was able to stay within that.
You know what? I'll go back and look at the panelists, because he
Yeah.
was one of the panelists on the
Yeah.
later panel, and I feel like he was affiliated with New Hampshire Housing, or he worked with them in some
We could find it.
We should find it, because I
And
think
to have somebody that has used it and see how it works.
Yeah.
But we had discussed it with a developer here, and
Well, the
Randolphs
Randolphs
thing,
really liked it.
he
Yeah.
really liked it because he wishes he could use it now because it would
Yeah,
allow
he
him.
was saying, I wish I could use it in Dover, because
It's a
that would allow me to get more
Yeah.
people who really need housing
Yeah.
into his units.
Yeah, because it lets you drop down, I know we keep talking 60%, but it lets you drop down to have some units that are lower than that, you know, the really hard pressed, like, I mean, I keep throwing out the medical stuff, but if you're like, and maybe the service would be the same, if you're like a LNA or a service person, you're only making $17 an hour, you know, the 60% median is still too high for you. And if you do like the cost averaging, you could have some units that are, say, down in the 30%, but you would use more expensive units to subsidize them. And I think the other thing that came up repeatedly in the public comments, we talked about this, is not to have this monolithic complex of just 60%. And when you do the averaging, it's not.
You get a
You
nice
can have somebody who's paying 130% of median income in their apartment and somebody paying 30% in their apartment. And
Yeah.
using cost averaging allows you to diversify that building with an economic diversity. So it's a really cool idea.
Yeah.
And it's, from a finance perspective, it's helpful too, because you can build out your plan and get your funding based on saying,
Yeah.
I'm going to average 80%,
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah.
But some of them are at 100%, some of them are at 60%, so you get that wider range, but you still are able to guarantee to your investors,
You get financing.
I'm going to have this income.
Yeah,
This is coming
that's
in.
great. It's a
Are you
great idea.
likely to get a scenario would be everything's in the middle, so you're not getting the low income that you wanted?
It's possible. I mean, that
what
is a
he's
quote,
applying.
an easy way out potentially but it also creates this flexibility for landlords who are really interested in being able to service a greater variety of folks.
And those that are getting grants have to. They have to they have to care. And then otherwise it's those that are, able to, like in the Sophie Banner, there was that 1 or 2 units because his costs came in, they weren't required to be at fair market, but because his costs came in, he was able to say, I can help this family move here at a lower rate, and because not all developers are evil. There's a lot of good people out there.
this is an excellent point.
And
Yeah.
I think that people realize that these are people that are living their lives and raising their
That's a
kids.
sacrilegious thing
Yeah.
to say in this town.
Yeah, well, that's what people think, they're evil, but not all of them are. And it's not fair to say that, but anyways, because that developer, He didn't have to do that.
No, and he
No.
doesn't have to do a lot of the things that he does.
And
a lot of
that's the other thing that I think people really need to get their heads around is that most of the developers who are in this part of the development niche are people who are more socially minded and groups that are more socially minded than the ones who are doing like the student housing.
Plus, if you're a good businessman, you want to build a good development that's community, because that opens you up to more possible developments. If you do like a crappy development that's just 60% and it's this box development, and you go to another community and say, look, I want to do this in your town, they're going to be like, no. But if you come up with a really good, thoughtful, innovative idea, they're going to say, yeah, we would like that here. So it's just from a strictly business sense, it's good business.
The quality of your unit, because, I mean, I was just looking at a unit built by a developer for an over 55 for a real estate buyer on Saturday. And the same builder had one in another town, and we went to look at the newer unit. And you can see how it's the same, but it makes a big difference. You know, and the people talk. You don't ask somebody to spend $750,000 for a piece of crap. You know? Things might be expensive, but people are still like, want value for their money. All right, do we have any other questions with the new amendment? It's kind of tinkering along.
Good luck.
Can we use, could we or should we pull some of the frequently asked questions for Durham Friday updates?
Oh, that might be a good idea.
Oh, yeah.
There's some that aren't specific to the ordinance, so if the ordinance is already like a ship that's sailing, then
Yeah, so some of these have been addressed by us previously, but some of them are definitely new.
Yeah.
like what is missing middle housing, and there's even the one about undergraduate students has some good points.
The student one, where is that?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Can we build more housing and also protect open space?
What about explanation of what HUD fair market rent is too?
Yeah.
Oh, I have that on page 4.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
maybe that could be something. What is HUD fair market rent? Because a lot of people don't know what that is.
Michael, do you have an extra copy?
Oh, yeah.
I have the wrong amendment with me.
Oh, that's the FAQs.
Oh, right.
Oh, you wanted the ordinance?
Yeah, your,
Oh, I didn't bring
you
that.
haven't printed it up yet.
Yeah. What?
Which ones would you suggest would be good for?
With your suggestions.
The front page is
Oh.
long, but
That's on the website, but I can email it. Want me to email that to you?
But
We
that-
emailed it already.
what does affordable housing mean?
Yeah, it's also on the
It is good?
website under
What
housing.
does affordable housing mean and what is workforce housing?
On the second page, is there really a need for more housing in Durham? I feel like it's written pretty in neutral language.
Well, you know what, this is my opinion, but people say, well, what are the reasons Durham should build more housing? There's the legal thing, there's the moral thing, there's what's good for Durham. And I don't think it's a real winning argument in town to say, oh, legally the state's telling us we must.
Yeah,
There's different
it-
opinions, and people don't like to have stuff thing. Plus, it'll be good for Durham.
I think that you need to do a better job at saying why it's good for Durham. And while I was reading your notes here, what popped into my mind was, ask the question, are you happy with the current mix of students and non-students in our in the community? And if the answer is no, then you have to let more other people in. It's as simple as that. You're not going to make the students go away. You're going to have to let in. If you want a lesser mix of students, you have to let more people in to dilute it.
So I like on the last page, both of those. Can we, because it came up in our top, in the things when you went around the committees, can we build more housing and also protect open space is a really good one. And then the other one is, why is the district being created in overlay areas rather than a core downtown? Isn't that sprawl? I think both those are really good ones because they came up in when people talked. And you can break them, one week and one the next.
Yeah, those two, yeah, 1 week and then maybe what is fair market rent? I think we do have to be careful with the Friday updates that nothing is opinion, because Todd doesn't like opinion. I think can we build more, I mean, the thing is, like, on the one on building housing and protecting open space, that's coming straight out of what our code. That's how we are already doing it. So that is not opinion, that is fact.
Right.
And why is this district being created as an overlay? There are some very factual reasons why we're choosing that. And in reality too, it could give you an opportunity to say that downtown is going to be a focus, but it's not the focus of this overlay.
Right.
It's going to require, it's a different, you
Oh, we
can't
can add
have the
that, yeah.
same, you can't wear the same outfit to different events. You don't wear the same outfit that you wear to a wedding that you wear to a baseball game. It's just two different things. Sorry, that's how I see it.
I went to the Metropolitan Opera and I was looking for mink and I saw denim. I couldn't believe it.
People underdress now. They underdress.
But I mean, I think those two, that last page encompassed a lot of the concerns that I heard from both the public hearing and from your presentation earlier. And I think it's important for people to kind of, at least those are good things to talk about.
And they're fact, they really are based on facts.
Yeah.
They're not opinion. And I do think,
I could debate that. It all depends on what you're, again, about who's asking the question and what they consider to be protecting open space. If, you know, it's, you have to, a lot of people who are making the argument that we're not protecting open space feel that we can do things that we're not allowed to do legally. Like,
yeah.
you know what, you can't develop on that 50-acre lot at all. That would
They
conserve the
already
open space. But, you know, the owner's allowed to build on it, sorry. That you can't stop, and they're allowed to, you know, and even though we might have a 3.5-acre minimum, that doesn't necessarily mean that, I mean, the amount of impervious surface they're allowed still lets them to clear an acre or more.
And put in
Down
grass.
to, like,
And put down
driveway if they
Miracle Row.
want.
and
I mean,
all
we're
kinds
just trying to
of
have a
stuff.
conversation starter, so keeping it simple,
Yeah.
I think, is the
Yeah.
way.
But you know,
Those
this
are two
is good.
significant
Like they,
issues.
and these facts, the one thing we do have to be, if you read into each answer, there is a lot of ordinance-specific stuff in there, in the
Yeah.
answers.
Yeah.
And that's because it was designed, this FAQ is designed to be a supporting document for the overlay district. So, yes, we can use it, but we're going to have to be careful that when we put something up there out of context, people are going to say, what's this answer talking about? It doesn't, what ordinance is it actually talking about?
So I think I could just give an intro that what's going on with the ordinance now before the planning board.
Some of the
public
questions.
No,
hearing,
I
or
meant
how-
when, if you were to take a snippet of this and put it into Friday updates, it may end up being out of context.
That's what
You
he's
have
talking
to
about.
put it in.
Yeah.
giving
Yeah.
some
Oh, well,
context.
Yeah,
so
put
how
it
do
in
we,
context.
should we put
gotta
that,
place
all
it
or
in
part of it in
context.
the Friday
No,
update?
Well, I think for each, if we are going to, if the, let's say you're doing the last one there, which was the, why are we not doing, you know,
Why is this district being
why is
created?
this, you know, I mean, that's, or can we build housing and also protect open space? When you read through the answer, it says, you know, it is definitely, would need a prequel saying, you know, the housing task force is providing this note as an information for the town,
Yeah.
but it's doing so in support of, you know, of the, you know, this is, yeah, it has to do with the overlay district.
You
But it
could
does-
just
I think
do it-
one of the things that I've had a problem with the conservation, it isn't how much land, it's what land. Like there are you know, if you have 5 acres sort of, you know, surrounded with houses, it does nothing for wildlife habitat. There are, you know, certain species of wildlife that have to have blocks, and the people nowadays are talking about travel corridors for wildlife. And if you have one of those that's well established, you don't want to put your houses in those corridors. So I think that it really has to be maybe it has to go to somebody who knows conservation to guide the planning board in making this a meaningful open space.
Our conservation commission's work.
Working on an overlay.
These are
There
some
have
questions.
been public comments and questions that have come out, and this is a start to answer some of the questions that are frequently asked, and that way you could have this entire document and just a link, and then you won't take up a big, long thing of Friday afternoon.
Yeah, yeah.
Right, okay.
And that
That's a
would,
good
that
idea.
makes this stuff public with the answers, which
Yeah.
people actually
That
could,
sounds good.
that's actually a good option for it. And it's in relation to, it's specifically in relation to the
To the
proposed.
ordinance, yeah.
proposed
I don't think that giving the amount of open space that Durham already has is a good answer, because it tells people, it doesn't tell people what open space in the future should be. I ran into
Well-
somebody outside the town hall, she was with the town assessor, what it's doing to our tax base and this and that, and totally underestimating why the town of Durham has repeatedly voted to conserve land. And it generally is one particular parcel they see as being very important. Saying the amount of open space, and you have identified that a lot of our open space is owned by the university or the state, and it has no conservation easements on it. A piece of property near me was given to the Forest Society, and then the Forest Society sold it to the town. And, under those circumstances, land could be sold, but not protected in the process.
Oh, Wagon Hill's not protected, it's just owned by the town.
It could be really shattering if you give your land for conservation, but don't put an easement on it, and then it winds up getting developed.
Well, a lot of, yeah, but at the same time, a lot of UNH land is restricted with conservation or specific requirements.
College Woods isn't, I don't know if east and west.
There's no easement or anything.
Or
College, no.
Some are, some aren't, they're not all.
Yeah, it's a mix.
Foss
it's a
Farm,
mix.
I mean-
that's a tremendous amount of land.
Wagon Hill isn't
Yeah.
protected, it's just owned by the state. And people seem,
The town.
owned by the town, and they just seem to think, well, the town would never sell it, but there's no guarantee of that. In 100 years, we're not gonna be here, who knows?
I killed myself trying to get the university to put an easement on the farms on Lee Hook Road.
They won't
I
do
wound
it.
up, arguing with the attorney and going to the attorney general, and, they wouldn't budge.
They wouldn't budge.
Well, remember when
Well-
the land that was owned by the school district near Orchard Drive,
Oh, boy.
people wanted that to be open space, but the school, they wanted, make some money on it.
They need to make the
understandably.
money on
I
it.
was actually part of that whole thing, yeah.
Well,
The school wanted to build initially the middle school on Orchard Drive. And then it turned out the property didn't work. But then a resident came forward and said, look, rather than just selling this to a developer, because we were going to put it, because as a school district, we have a fiduciary responsibility to try to get money for the property. But a resident came forward with a proposal that was a fair market, it really matched what the bid we had, and we sold the property to be used for conservation land.
I have one more thing before we retire.
but we still have one more agenda item we need to get onto.
Okay,
for
this
the
is
downtown.
relative to the public hearing and the
Okay.
talk about concentrating in the downtown. When I
Well, that's what we're gonna
testified at the
discuss
public
next.
hearing, I said that I really thought before we concentrate on putting too much effort into the downtown, that we really ought to coordinate that with the commercial development. And I really thought that we need some kind of joint effort with a downtown task force
Well,
that could be formed up.
If you allow us to go on to that, I will explain
Well,
just
I was
that.
afraid you'd leave.
No, that's exactly what, no, that's exactly what the intent is to
Okay.
create a working group to investigate it.
Okay, my job is done here.
Yeah, because if we move on, if we move on to the housing
Oh,
downtown.
you're volunteering?
You're a volunteer. We'll drag you in when we want you. We'll just let you know when to show up. Anyways, so the housing downtown, Todd came here, and some of you weren't here at that meeting, but Todd came here to talk about housing downtown. It is obviously something that people in the community are talking about, and the subject also came up at the planning board. Now, on the planning board, there were 2 members of the planning board that thought they wanted to start investigating how to look into it. And then when we talked about it, when Todd came, we kind of were thinking that in partnership with the Housing Task Force and the 1 or 2 members that are on the planning board, I know one of them is still interested, I'm not sure the other one is, but we can find out, with working together, because there is a lot to do. There is a lot to do. And Al and I have both had a lot of experience in the downtown and dealing with the property owners, the business owners, some of the developers we've contacted over the years. So we have a lot of that firsthand experience already. And I think Heather Grant was also interested in joining from the task force group and then partnering with the planning board people that want to do it. I know at least one is, maybe both of them. And then we can start coming together and start looking at all the different aspects, because pick a corner of a street and there's a different aspect, okay? Which is different than on the other side of Madbury Commons, or, it's all different. And there's infrastructure issues that are intense. There's the creek. And there's new property owners at the Mill Plaza.
And there's the economic, what makes sense for a business person.
Yeah.
For sure. And I think the other thing too is, I mean, at least from Sally and my perspective, we both have been involved in a lot of things. Because when people kept talking downtown, they kind of forget what actually happened downtown. So we were involved in zoning, a zoning amendment, and it's ironic we're talking about housing downtown, because when I first came on the town council in 2016, there was a zoning amendment that would allow no residential development downtown. And there was exactly one person, by the way, on the town council who spoke out initially against it, me. And eventually I turned and flipped it. So we've come literally 360 degrees. And so we've been involved with you brought up height downtown. We were involved in zoning, trying to change the height of buildings downtown. We were involved in the purchase of 66 Main Street, which came downtown.
Yeah.
We were involved in getting the business owners together in Celebrate Durham and working with them and discussing about development. We've seen a proposal from Jenkins Court all the way to Durham House of Pizza if you redeveloped it. So we've seen at least 7 or 8 years of incarnation of this. It's kind of wild to see it come back.
Yeah, so that's why, so we know that it's not just it's not going to be a simple process for the planning board just to come up and say, let's do this, this, and this. Because it is a minefield.
It will make this first initial overlay district look like a baby step.
Well, that's why I was thinking it would be
So
great
true.
if we could separate the 2 efforts.
Well, they are.
So
That's
that,
why we did.
we can maybe say something about this is what we think the potential might be, without getting into the weeds about, the microeconomics of how to divide these buildings and which lots can be really infilled.
But I think that's the problem. I think with the downtown, there may be some weed whacking we will need to do. Because it's, 66 Main Street is a different situation than the redevelopment of where, in the middle where you have all those 1-story buildings. That's a completely different territory than 66 Main Street. 66 Main Street is not Mill Plaza. They're all very different. They all have different challenges, and they have different ownership and different dynamics. And I think the most success will probably be with 66 Main Street, but only if the town and the council is willing to ante up some.
And the other thing too was when we came forward and talked about housing, when the Housing Task Force first said that Durham needed housing, the pushback we got is, well, you guys don't have the data, you don't have all the stuff. And so the irony is that's what's happened with the downtown. The downtown, we've had multiple zoning ordinances and purchases come forward, but we never had anything about what the infrastructure looked like, or all the work that you need to move forward to really develop zoning that meets those challenges. That wasn't done. That hasn't been presented. And so having a group that actually does that, which is kind of the foundation we did for the overlay,
Yeah.
doing that for downtown is essential for coming up for zoning that'll work.
So Ally, you've mentioned several different efforts to address it. Are any of those current enough so that we can use that as
No,
a background for, no?
they're not.
They're not, they don't have,
They
again,
didn't have the meat in them.
they didn't have the underlying, I mean, again, bringing all that together is part of it, but the big component that's really missing in a lot of this is the infrastructure of downtown. There is, I mean, right now, what's an incredible impediment, and we know, actually, we can, from Clark's redevelopment, where they did Chow Italia, what it looks like to actually do a redevelopment downtown. But one of the barriers clearly that's come up with that is infrastructure. It came up with Clark's, and when 66 Main Street,
yeah.
when we had the talks about redeveloping Main, that, boom, it came right up
And-
there.
and
So what
coming
are
up
we
again with
talking when we're
76 Main
talking
Street.
infrastructure?
Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Water, sewer, what infrastructure?
Water,
are we
sewer.
talking
All of it.
Water,
And-
sewer,
Power,
wastewater.
stormwater, all that has come up.
That's the biggest
I think
biggest
the town
detriment.
has been, with the MS4 process, has been doing a lot of work on stormwater management.
Right, but the infrastructure to carry it from the downtown can't take anything more than what's already there. And
It
actually,
can't-
it's challenged to take what's
It
there.
can't even take a 2-year storm flow right now.
No.
EPA is insisting that these towns do
Yeah.
much more. And I
Well-
think Durham has been following their process for doing it, but we've been way ahead of the process.
Well, the problem though is that every one of those developments that you ask to develop, the town says you got to pay for the infrastructure, and we're trying to do. I try to do the downtown in a piecemeal piece. Develop is excruciatingly painful, really expensive, and an incredible barrier to any kind of development,
Yeah, I
which is
mean,
why we don't have any development.
It should be
downtown.
a TIF,
Yeah.
really.
Anyway, so that is a major
It should
major
be.
barrier.
So there's going to be some suggestions that we just,
What is
But
that
here's an
difference?
interesting example, and this may come from the federal government, I'm not sure, but when 74 Main Street was being redeveloped, that's the yellow line, because peak flow is the big problem to manage. Overall flow it's the peak, that's the problem. Well, traditionally, even in a downtown, you don't worry about peak flow because you want development, and you often have zero setbacks. So the drainage should be handled in the public infrastructure. Well, not only can we not increase peak flow, we cannot increase total flow. It's a little technical, which very honestly, as a planner, I think that's insane. I think this may be from MS4. Some of it may be town policy, I'm not really sure. But we told, when they wanted to redevelop 74 Main Street, which has a little yellow building on it and some pavement, says you cannot increase the total runoff here post-development. And they had to go through some crazy gyrations, having drainage structures on the roof, having some permeable pavement, I can't remember. You should never have to do that downtown. That's not what downtown should not be treated like Durham Point Road. It's different. And so there's some real problems
There's some
that
real
are
problems.
blocking reasonable development of downtown that I think we need to look
I think you're
at.
right
Yeah.
about that this should be a municipal thing. What happened to that money that
But-
we blew on the streetlights?
Well-
What was the name of that? It was a redevelopment fund where we put the money into something and you're supposed to get paid back by the advantages that you get.
You don't mean the UDAG, do you? From way back from under Jimmy Carter?
No.
Okay.
But I
Well-
think that we ought to be able to come up, where's Biden money there must
We've
be
got, well,
money available.
but actually, we've got a ton of that. We've got millions. The Durham's got millions from the infrastructure bill.
Where did
And we have a
Madbury
major,
Road and some others.
Madbury
yeah.
Road, they've redone
It's
a couple
crazy.
culverts, they're redoing the complete
I've seen
streets.
it.
Yeah, it's big, it's big.
crazy.
It's hard to get
a
from
lot
one
of
end of
money.
town. I live on Madbury Road, so I like, I always forget, no, I gotta go through Garrison. No, not at this time of day. It's
I've been
like,
driving the bus down through that construction zone the last
So
couple
did
of
that,
weeks.
did the complete streets on Madbury Road increase our capacity to manage stormwater at all?
Oh, yeah.
it
Oh, yeah. I'm
will,
sure it
but
will.
you still have.
Essentially, what we need is that to happen over and over again throughout town.
Yeah.
Well, you still have issues. I think what the bottom line is we do have a plan to start investigating downtown options and but there's a lot of research that we need to do and lots of conversations. So is that okay if that's how we kind of deal with it between the partnership? For those that are interested on here, we got 3 people, and then we have lots of people we can pull in.
So it would be a
Want to.
joint task force of the planning board and a,
No.
It won't be a task force,
It'll be a
working.
working group
Group.
of a couple of people from here and
Yeah,
a couple of people from the
from there.
planning board.
Oh, would it be useful
More of a
if,
working
I can ask Rich Rain if he can come to your next meeting and talk about infrastructure downtown? I think if he's available,
That'd probably
that'd
be
very
very
helpful.
wise, bring
Yeah.
us all
Probably a
up to
good
the same
idea.
speed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Should I?
don't
Let me ask him, see if he's
Why don't we-
available
Working
for the
group
next
meeting or
meeting.
the housing
No,
task
here,
force meeting?
Oh,
here.
here, for
The
the
working
task
group's
force.
really not gonna have a meeting. We're gonna meet like in Mill Plaza, and we're gonna connect with people. There'll be probably a lot of meetings, and
I think we have to be
And I-
very, I'm sorry, I interrupted.
there'll probably be a lot of meetings with Rich Rain, just getting some
I'll see if he's
education on
available next
aspects
meeting. Yeah,
of
that'd
what's
be
going
great.
on.
Well, this is an example where I think that we could get pulled down the rabbit hole looking at infrastructure when our job is to figure out how housing can get into
Well,
the overall.
That,
And, if we get
That's-
into the MS4.
no, we're not
because
gonna
we're
get,
after
we
the-
won't be getting into the MS4,
I think
but, yeah.
So it's like having some idea about what the infrastructure is. Everybody says, well, okay, we want to build downtown. Well, okay, what is the current state
Yeah.
of the infrastructure
It's-
downtown?
It's
You're right.
important if we're going to be making recommendations or to the planning board, to the town council, to the rest of the town,
It's gotta be.
of this is how we can do, this is what we should be doing, we need to know what the infrastructure is going to support 5 and 10 years down the road, what those expansion plans are, and things
Right.
like that. Or else we could be
a waste of
recommending something that's totally unfeasible.
And also, we need the total the total capacity of what we actually can build. Like, you have this block of buildings. Well, first of all, what if somebody were actually buy that and tear that all down and build it up, what would we actually get out of it? With what we have right now with our height limits? What would be the height limits? Would that even be something that would be digested by the town? Because we dealt with 2, Al and I were involved with 2 zoning amendments related to housing downtown. One had to do with the square footage of the units, and another one had to do with the raising of going up a story. We didn't really go up much. And none of those have caused any more building. So they're really just useless, because there is some reality about who owns the building, what are your intents, what could actually be built. If you maxed out what could actually be built. We could sit here and think about what we want for housing, but without knowing the technical aspects of what we have, it would be a waste of time.
Yeah, you guys are right on top of it. I have another, should we bring the university in, or are they kind of in
We're not
terms
gonna
of
bring the university.
stormwater, they're kind of self-sufficient?
We're not gonna bring the university in.
Well, we own, the university doesn't own any of that property per se of the downtown. Well, they own, actually, we lease Sammy's lot. But,
But
it's really, the infrastructure is going to fall on us, not the university. I think.
I want to ask, you're bringing UNH to talk about for what aspect?
Just what their plans are for future development. And also it'd be nice to know if they're already
We have access to their
making a
master
very
plan.
low bar in terms of their stormwater.
Yeah.
So if the town's being judged on the total amount of stormwater that's going out, and UNH is a big proportion of it, then it would be nice to
Well,
know.
We have access to the master plan, but even talking to the engineers on campus, they can't say much more than what's been budgeted by the trustees.
Yeah.
In the end, whatever they accomplish is at the whim of the Board of Trustees.
Yeah, yeah. I would not recommend partnering with the UNH on anything.
I
That
was
will
just
just
thinking
be,
is that-
yeah.
One of the
We-
boxes
I mean,
we should check.
if they could give us $10 million to do anything in town, I'd ask for the fire department.
And the
Yeah.
place that they're
It's
gonna
gonna cost
partner
more than
anyway, rather than partnering with UNH on the downtown per se, the UNH has already come out publicly in the press releases and pictures of West Edge. West
gonna be
Edge,
special.
when they do it, it's gonna
Not
be
gonna
some
look like
kind of
that.
land lease thing. That's another can of worms.
That's a whole
down there.
different thing.
And that's a completely separate thing that we can discuss, but I think the downtown is for us.
I think it's very exciting going at the, and there's been so many people who are interested in the downtown, and now we have another.
Well, I think there's also some reality investigation. We have to talk to the owners. Many people say, oh, all the college apartments can become workforce housing. Well, I think that's a very simplistic, it's certainly not going to become workforce
Ill-informed or
housing.
ignorant. That's an area where we need to do
It's-
more education.
We need to have some conversations with some of these property owners, because we could say that I can't see that from a business point of view, I can't really see why you would take,
We have a problem with the private property owners. I remember, did you know Jackie?
Yeah.
what's her name? Jackie, who owned that store. And they wanted to do something to improve her building, and she said, over my dead body, will you touch my building? I thought, wow, it was such a good idea.
Well, even
Well,
the flip
when-
side, the first one that had no residential development downtown, the business owner, no one even talked to them. We were implementing zoning without talking to any business or
Good
builder.
When we were
None of
gonna
the,
change-
none of the property owners did we talk to
What year was
at
that?
all.
That was
2016.
Okay, so that was the knee-jerk reaction after the initial build-out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Lesson learned.
That's how, almost all the downtown zoning has occurred, really.
Sure.
We've made a change, there's been a violent kickback, and then we turn it all off. And that's what happened. Back in 2016, 2017, we basically turned off all development downtown.
we turned it off before then with the changing of right around the time when they changed the zoning on Mill Plaza, and that all came from council too, without any conversation from the community. And so anyways, but we do have a plan going forward with that, and we will keep
Not to do it
everybody
that way.
updated.
So the working group is planning to talk to business owners and
Everybody.
Sure.
Okay.
Everybody, and to kind of just map the whole area out, and it's going to really be imagine you're gutting your kitchen and starting from, looking at it from.
So who's, other than Peyton and Tom DeCapo from the planning board, who's going to be
Me,
part of this
Al.
working group?
And I think Heather.
Do you want me to give you an overview of the downtown zoning for your next meeting?
That might be
Would that
good.
be helpful?
Yeah.
All
And if
right.
we can get Rich in to start talking about stuff.
Yeah, I'll have that for the next meeting.
Do we have unfinished business, as it were, with the overlay and all of that, before we turn our attention to the downtown, or we're going to
We
be
don't.
continuing along?
No, we don't, because right now, the overlay district is owned by the planning board, and the only involvement we would have in it would be to go to
Right,
public hearings and comment on it if we wanted to. But the planning board right now has it, and we don't have anything we have to do for it. I think what we'll be looking at now is we are going to be looking at two things. Looking at the downtown, and there's a lot of investigation in that, but also starting to look at the outreach and the comments from the outreach and start to look at our basic zoning and to see what recommendations could we be making. Could we be making that duplexes could be allowed in these zones? Start looking at the zoning map and say, well, where would we want multifamily housing to also be allowed? And start, that's really a different thing too, yeah.
Oh, you know, if the working group has Sally, Heather, Tom, and Peyton, that's a quorum. So that would have to be a public committee unless you want to make it just 3 members. And it to be not a public meeting, it has to be very informal. You think you probably want it to be a regular committee if we're going to do this.
Yeah, we want to, because we might have to meet, we'll have to find out what's going on with Tom, because doesn't Tom want it? Because there could be some things we have to really get into, some conversations we have to get into. All right. All right, is there anything else?
I mean, maybe this is more
So,
an existential question,
All
but
right, hold on.
I don't understand at this point why the housing task force should continue. I think this working group on the downtown, which is now becoming a committee to study downtown zoning more specifically, is essentially like the next step. We're just going to exist to have presentations to educate those folks who are in the working
No,
group.
you're overseeing it all.
We're actually overseeing it all, because the, if we're going to come up with downtown ideas, pulling it all together, we have to have it coming from somewhere. And the planning board isn't going to commit all that time to it.
But
Because
the
that's
working
not,
group is going to.
yeah, but it's part of the housing task force. And it
Why
will
can't
be
they just
just,
be a committee of the planning board?
because he's not on the planning
Or
board.
the task force.
I
It-
think that to answer your question though, I think that we're gonna gather all this information, and the housing task force really to your point, has been outreach. And so we're gonna generate a bunch of information that's gonna come from this downtown thing. I think it would be wise for the working group to hand that over to the task force, and the task force is then charged with disseminating that information out to the community.
We have to come up with like from the outreach, we have to create viable documentation of duplexes. Like say we want to say duplexes are now allowed. We have to create that amendment to send it to the planning board. We can't just give this information to the planning board. It'll sit there and make it up. They're not going to make it up. We have to make it up. We have to create it.
Eileen has a valid point, and it might be worth throwing on the next agenda an item to discuss what we see we can still do as the task force as opposed to something else. Because and if we're not sure, then maybe Heather brings it back to the town council and say,
Yeah.
this is what we see, what we would still be working on going forward. Do you want to keep us in here doing that, or are we done?
Well, that's kind of what my time frame, the way I think we've discussed it before, is like getting our outreach, getting all this done, spending, the November, December, January, looking at what we can create for an amendment to hand to the planning board for things other than, downtown won't be ready by then, but the results of outreach, to put it there, and then present that to the planning board, and then, because the council already has like a kill switch date on the housing task force in the spring, so I figured that timing will just kind of come together by the time we create something, and then you can present it, and then we can discuss then what the next logical step would be.
I mean, we could, like, just from that recommendation, it could be we say, look, we think that from what we saw in our outreach, that detached ADUs by right in residential zones is what we heard a lot about. This is what we think is a good idea, and we could bring that forward and we could
some other
easily
things,
do that in a lot less time than the downtown. We could, before our drop dead date of March is there, we theoretically could bring that forward and have that to the planning board.
The stuff from the outreach, the downtown is going to be a completely different aspect.
So Sally, stepping back, it's kind of related, but I'm not happy with the housing task force sending nothing but planning board members onto the working group.
Well, it's not just.
I'm not a planning board.
He's not a planning.
Okay, but I think we should also see if one of the Michaels wants to join,
Yeah,
all right? And, because
that's fine, but that would be.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear what you were saying.
Uh,
You're not.
we have
gonna
the members who aren't here
It
today.
just happens to be the,
I want to reach out to them to see if they want to join
The Michaels.
the working group.
Or unless you want to.
Well, you know, actually, Michael is developing
Which
a
Michael?
project.
Michael Mulhern.
Michael Mulhern is actually in the process of developing a workforce.
Well, we'll ask them
development.
both.
So he's a banker, so he would be really helpful to have.
We'll ask them both and see if you could, maybe we could reach out to them.
Yeah.
But yeah, I forgot they weren't here.
Yeah, because I don't want that working group to be too heavily weighted to the planning board.
Yeah. Makes sense.
I'll help out. You need a conservationist
Well,
to
there
put the
will be
brakes on
aspects
everything.
there will be aspects, but we'll have to pull stuff in, see how that works legally, pull stuff in over it. I mean, because that's what I think of the housing task force is really doing it. And then we had a planning board member that is interested in tagging along. It's almost like it's coming from the housing
Well,
task force.
Tom and
But-
Peyton initially came to me, I think, in June wanting to do this.
Yeah.
Then Todd came to the Housing Task Force,
Yeah.
and the Housing Task Force picked up the baton. And then at our last meeting, we said, well, why don't we try to get the two groups together?
Yeah, and what if it is from the housing task force, but we're kind of have a planning board, because we have you, but Peyton has invested some time into it already, so.
Yeah.
I think it's very exciting.
So what would be the constitution of it? Be basically it's coming out from
Well,
the task force.
That's the whole,
And if it's a task force, that's doing it, then anybody in the task force can be pulled into it. And then we can have a planning board, because that would be your planning board rep, and then be Peyton, because I would be acting from the planning board. And then we have a council
the
rep.
planning board at the last meeting agreed to work with the Housing Task Force on this.
Yeah.
I don't believe we specifically said who was going to take the lead or if we really care. There was discussion as to, could we do it? The answer was yes. Could we do it with people who aren't on the planning board or the Housing Task Force? Based on past working groups we've had for architectural stuff, the answer is yes.
Yeah,
So, I mean, any of that happens, if this working group still wants to work beyond the life of the Housing Task Force, the planning board could adopt it,
yeah.
adopt them under their umbrella,
Yeah.
if necessary, I suppose. So, I mean, all that's there,
I recommend we go forward as a housing task force, bringing in some planning board member.
Do we need anyone from I guess they would be just dropping in, the Durham Business Association.
That's-
They've developed some very strong opinions.
I think you'll just reach out to them.
Yeah,
They're
just-
We'll
not-
reach
they're-
out to them,
they're
but
not-
they're very loose now. They almost are non-existent.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they're non-existent. COVID pretty much did them in.
yeah.
All right. But yeah, I think we have to still continue, but I think we do have an endpoint in the spring for this particular thing. But I think it's going to be concentrating on, we are going to be doing two more things. We're looking at the downtown, but we're also we can firm up the suggestions that have come out of the outreach and create some document some changes to zoning, and we have the reasons why.
Are we getting, from these forums that you're having, are we getting anything that will help us to put together an ordinance or a policy statement, or, like we did with our first outreach, to pull it all together and say, this is the direction that this sets us?
Well, other than the responses of what people think they wouldn't mind seeing.
So this is more us talking to them rather than us collecting data from them.
Well, I don't know what you mean by data. For us, we're just really talking to them about what is out there, and then they're saying, yeah, I could understand duplexes. I don't see any reason why we can't do duplexes. You know what I mean? More like a community feel. Yeah, I'm happy with that. I think we could do that. I think we could do that. Or I don't want to do that. Or if we're going to do that, we need to do this. That's kind
Yeah,
of.
it's been a qualitative rather than a
Yeah.
quantitative outreach.
Yeah.
So
They're not
doing a
giving us data.
survey, but just reaching out. This is following up on that earlier outreach with employers
So,
and workers.
Yeah, so for instance, if we were going to do anything, you know, to look at the conservation subdivision, we might say, well, maybe we do need to take more into consideration about wildlife pathways. And so could be something that could be clarified in the documentation to find these things or something like that. You know, we are learning a lot from what people see and what they, you know, understand is what they would like. It's working so far.
I was talking to someone who said, well, you know, I have no idea what's going on there. I don't know what's going on behind my back over there with that housing. I felt like throttling her. You know,
It's not going on behind your back. You gotta actually watch a meeting.
Days we've been, yeah.
Just watch the meeting.
Don't you
They're
read
open
Friday
meetings, even though the
updates?
door
Yeah.
is, the moment is
Don't
closed.
you read Friday updates? What more can we do?
It's not behind your back, you just gotta go to a meeting and do something. All right, well, is there anything else? Any other questions?
Next meeting is,
Second Monday in
October.
October.
predictably,
Isn't it shifted actually due to Indigenous Peoples' Day?
What?
Yes.
That's
it
Indigenous
should be.
Peoples' Day, so it should be the third.
Oh, third Monday in October.
then we can avoid those holidays.
So many holidays.